Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly update on the energy industry, where we dive deep into the energy development shaping Africa and the world. Not just the headlines, but what they really mean for people, economies, and the planet. This week, we will open with a legal victory that has implications for Nigeria's energy and economic security. Then we will ride through gas and oil frontiers in Africa, the massive refining ambitions, global market tremors, the big renewable shift, power and policy tensions, and end with a look at what all this means for you. Let's get started. We start from the legal arena with a story out from the UK. The UK Supreme Court has just upheld a cost order that requires Process and Industrial Development, PNID, a small offshore company, to pay up to £44 million in legal costs to Nigeria in a case that dates back over a decade. What's this case about? Recall that in 2010, PNID signed a gas supply and processing agreement with Nigeria, with a plan to build a gas processing plant in Calabar. That agreement collapsed. PNID claimed huge compensation, initially about $9.6 billion, and later more than $11 billion with interest from Nigeria before an arbitration panel in London. In 2023, and after a rigorous court battle, the UK Commercial Court found that the arbitration award had been procured by fraud, including bribery and misuse of Nigeria's confidential documents. The $11 billion award was therefore set aside. Now, the Supreme Court has affirmed that the cost order incurred by Nigeria to defend itself must be paid in pounds and not in naira, rejecting PNID's attempt to limit their liability via a currency conversion. Why does this matter? First, for national economic and energy security. If the arbitral award had not been set aside, Nigeria was facing a claim of billions in dollars that could have severely weakened its fiscal position and net foreign reserves. By successfully defending itself, Nigeria will say, or we may say, dodge a golden bullet, helping it consolidate its economic recovery journey under the new government. Second is about the investment climate and contract trusts. This case shows that fraudulent or deeply flawed contracts can be challenged, something that matters when governments negotiate large energy deals. It reinforces that governance, transparency, and contract integrity matter just as much as investment and profit. It is also a reminder for African countries and their partners to build sound contract frameworks, legal capacity, and oversight, along with the need for physical energy infrastructure. Next, we move to Southern Africa and to Namibia in the offshore Soaring Basin frontier, where Rhino Resources, the operator of Petroleum Exploration License PEL 85 in Namibia's Orange Basin, with a 42.5% working interest, has confirmed a major gas condensate discovery at its Volans 1X well. They reportedly encountered 26 meters of net pay in rich gas condensate bearing reservoirs. In context, Namibia has in the last few years seen attention from major players. For example, the well in question is operated with its partner, Azule Energy, a JV between BP and Eni, with interest in its condensate to gas ratio. Now, there's also the Total Energies Venus project in Namibia's Orange Basin discovery in February 2022, and said to be one of the continent's largest resource discoveries in decades, with an estimated 1.5 billion barrels of light crude at 45 degrees API and 4.8 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. The API, American Petroleum Institute gravity, is a measure of how heavy a petroleum liquid is compared to water. If the API gravity is greater than 10, it means the liquid is lighter and will float on water. But if the API gravity is lower than 10, it signifies a heavier liquid that will sink. In the context of this Namibian discovery, the crude grade is of low density and high product yielding, sought after by refineries. Total Energies has continued to work with the government towards working out a commercially viable development plan for the technically challenging oil field. CEO Patrick Pouyanné has said that the 2029-2030 target for first oil can only be met if a final investment decision is reached by the end of this year. Now, why these discoveries matter? For Namibia, it reinforces its potential to become a new offshore energy player with implications for job creation, revenue growth, local content, capacity building, and regional supply of products. For Africa, it also shifts some of the attention on the map beyond West Africa and East Africa to the southern part. For the world, as the global energy system seeks both security and transition, Large condensates, like gas discoveries like this, they matter, especially because gas acts as a bridge fuel and condensate as multiple downstream uses. Discoveries are one thing, but the road to monetization is the next heavy lift. And next, we move to Dangote Refinery that grabbed global attention again this week. What is the story? The refinery currently has a nameplate capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. Dangote plans to double this capacity to about 1.4 million barrels per day, which would make it the largest single-site refinery in the world, surpassing India's famed Reliance Industries Jamnagar complex. Recall that the Jamnagar refinery was commissioned in July 1999 with initial capacity of 668,000 barrels per day and over time grew to over 1.24 million barrels per day. Also very interesting is Dangote is announcing its intention to sell 10% of the refinery stake via listing on the Nigerian exchange within the next year. And it's in talks with Middle Eastern investors to co-fund the planned capacity increase to 1.4 million barrels per day. Why does this matter? Downstream capacity at this scale in Africa means Africa can refine more of its crude locally, reducing import dependence for products like petrol, diesel, jet fuel, and others. That matters for fuel security, currency stability, and of course, jobs. For investors and local markets, the 10% equity sale offers a route for public participation and capital raising. Within the global context, if Dangote executes a 1.4 million barrels per day expansion, it sets a new benchmark in refining capacity outside of the Middle East Asia hubs. It signals that Africa isn't just catching up, it can lead the midstream segment of the oil industry. What to watch? Now, whether the expansion will really reach 1.4 million barrels per day, and by when? Dangote is one person, as we know, that never gives up. Watch out. How will funding be structured? Is it by share sale? Will it be strategic partnership, debt financing? Discussions, of course, are ongoing in this regard. How will this affect Nigeria's crude export dynamics? Are we going to export less crude, refine more locally? Well, we will wait and see. Next, we'll talk about Nigeria's OPEC quota push. Heineken Lopobiri, Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Oil, has announced the country will seek a quota increase from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, from the current 1.5 million barrels per day to 2 million barrels per day, on the back of the reported output of 1.7 to 1.8 million barrels per day Nigeria currently produces, inclusive of condensate. Why is this important? Because oil production quota is critical to export revenue, national budget, and the incentives to explore and drill more wells. If Nigeria gets the high quota, it signals confidence and recovery in its upstream sector due to ongoing reforms. Drilling rigs and new investments are already coming in, driven by indigenous oil and gas players. Recall the recent announcement by the Sahara Group of its recent acquisition of 7 oil drilling rigs and its goal of expanding its production capacity to 350,000 barrels per day within the next 5 years. It also signals that oil and gas remain part of Africa's energy reality, not just renewables. It matters for global market as well, especially if production expands while other regions face decline or sanctions. For citizens, more production can mean more national revenue and potentially better infrastructure if resource revenues are well managed. And this week, there were shocks in the global oil markets with direct impact on oil prices. The United States imposed full blocking sanctions on Russia's 2 largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, freezing US assets and forbidding US companies from transacting with them. Secondary sanctions were also placed over foreign financial institutions that do business with these sanctioned Russian companies. And this will include banks that facilitate sales of Russian oil, especially in China. The immediate result, oil prices jumped. Brent crude surpassed the $65 range, reaching a 2-week high. What does this mean for Africa and global audience? For exporting countries, higher oil prices mean boosts in government revenues, but this may also mean higher domestic fuel costs if petrol is imported on the back of oil exports, which may then lead to inflationary risk. For importers, higher prices mean more pressure on budgets and also on consumers. It may also lead to possible redirection in global trade. As Russian supply becomes riskier, refineries may look to African crude. That opens increased trade opportunities, but existing oil infrastructure and logistics that is required have to match. For consumers, the takeaway is when a sanction appears far away, its effects may also travel fast and felt at fuel pumps, national budgets, and even investment decisions may be affected. But we wait to see how this plays out in the coming weeks. And next from Nigeria, the Vice President Kashim Shettima announced at the Nigerian Renewable Energy Innovation Forum 2025 in Abuja that the country has secured over $400 million in new investment commitments for its renewable energy manufacturing value chain. These funds are targeted at the local production of solar panels, smart meters, battery storage, and recycling. And this investment is projected to create more than 1,500 direct jobs across several states, highlighting increasing global confidence in Nigeria's transition to clean energy. And still on renewables, we have a historic moment where for the very first time, global renewable electricity generation has overtaken coal. According to the global think tank EMBA, in the half year 2025, renewables, hydro, wind, solar produce approximately 5,072 terawatt hour, while coal generated approximately 4,896 terawatt hour. Solar alone grew 31% year on year, wind grew 77%. China and India reportedly led the surge in power generation via these sources. Why does this matter? It isn't just symbolic, it signals that the energy transition may be gaining momentum. It's no longer a futuristic matter, but increasingly becoming a reality. For Africa, we've often spoken about leapfrogging. This provides more evidence that clean power can be built at scale with country collaborations, and that the world may be waking up to this reality. It also raises a new question. Are African grid and policy frameworks ready to absorb this wave? The shift is happening slowly and steadily, and we would have to be very intentional. This is why the earlier story about the $400 million investment in renewable energy announced by the Vice President of Nigeria is a welcome development. And this brings us to the nuanced part. Many developing countries, including South Africa and Nigeria, are adopting gas as a transition fuel to support industrialization, jobs, and reliable power. This is, of course, a very good objective to pursue while scaling up renewables as the alternative. It's part of the concept known as the just energy transition. And very interesting developments coming out from South Africa, where the Supreme Court of Appeal has altered Eskom's proposed 3,000 megawatt gas-fired power plant at Richards Bay because the environmental assessment did not properly consider climate obligations, alternatives, and alleged inadequate local consultations. This doesn't mean South Africa is rejecting gas. Rather, it means the project needs to align with climate goals and social expectations. So the message is yes to gas infrastructure and yes to renewables. The challenge is about planning, design, inclusion, and creating a balance between industrialization, economic development, and the need to do so sustainably. And talking about consultations, the court also agrees that consultation could have also been done in isiZulu, a Southern Bantu language spoken primarily in South Africa, which is one of the 11 official languages and the most widely spoken first language in South Africa. And perhaps a point of lesson to note for community relations experts. This reminds us that energy projects can no longer just be about machines, pipelines, contracts. They must also integrate governance, climate, and of course, community interest. For African nations, the path to power expansion is complex. It's not merely about adding capacity. It's about adding capacity rightly. Gas is still on many agendas, for example, in Nigeria and South Africa. But how it is developed, who benefits, who is impacted, and how the infrastructure project fits into sustainability objectives should now be part of the focus. Putting it succinctly, the South African Minister of Electricity and Energy, Mr. Gosiensho Ramogopa, has said that South Africa's strategic direction is how to balance the core dilemma facing the country, which is to balance the competing priorities of universal access, affordability, security of supply, and environmental sustainability. This is similar to the challenge facing most sub-Saharan African countries. And to our final reflection this week across Africa and the globe, we see two loud moving forces. The value and relevance of hydrocarbon in Africa, from discoveries to production, price rebounds, planned refining mega projects, and others. And the second, the accelerating rise of renewables and the systems, the policies, and investments framework around them. Here is the nuance. The energy transition is not simply about fossils out, clean energy in. It's more like a relay race. The political economy of each country and region is influencing the approach to adopt, even within the broader framework of climate action and objectives. As mentioned earlier, balance is key. Access to energy, the need for economic empowerment, industrialization, and sustainability. Our takeaways: as an investor, Africa isn't just a passive frontier, it's actively rewriting its energy future. But you need to pay attention to law, enabling environment, contracts, local content, and local peculiarities. As policymakers, the days of just drill and exports are over for oil and other minerals. Every project now sits at the intersection of climate, community, security, value creation, and economic growth. All of these issues must be considered. For citizens, these stories affect everyone. The planned refinery expansion could lower fuel prices due to the benefit of economies of scale. The gas deal may improve power reliability and less outages, and thus improve productivity. The renewable shift could bring electricity where none previously existed. But for all these to happen, they must be properly executed. In essence, we're not just witnessing changes in kilowatt hours or barrels per day, we are witnessing changes in power, policy, and their impact on the planet. Africa's energy stories are no longer sideshows in a global drama. They are central. And that's our update for the week. If you've enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment or suggestion. I am Babatunde, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.